take us live.
Yep, perfect. Just get a thumbs up, Megan, if you can hear us. Perfect, sounds good. Perfect. Good evening, everybody. It is February 19th, 2025 at 6:05 p.m. We'll call this session of West Hants Regional Municipality Audit Committee to order. We'll begin with any declarations of conflict of interest committee. Anybody has anything? All right. We do have an agenda. It was circulated previous to the meeting. Smaller agenda with some policy controls presentation from Manager Gibson at the end there. If everybody had a chance to look at that, if there's nothing to add or delete, we'll look for a motion to approve. Moved by Councillor Yanish, seconded by Councillor Whedon. Let's do a sign of hands or a thumbs up at home. All those in favor signify by hands up. Opposed? Perfect. Thank you very much, everybody. We are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. These lands are governed by the treaties of peace and friendship signed in 1726. We are all treaty people and have responsibilities to each other in this land. West Hants Regional Municipality also acknowledges the contributions African Nova Scotians have made to this land known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. Any other announcements from committee before we proceed? All right. We have a recommendation report on water operational audit. Director Rochon.
Thank you, Worship. So the report was circulated in our agenda package. This is, of course, following the bid submission that we had. We had closed our bids on the 8th, and we have received one proposal, and I said 8th of January, not February. And we had to go back to the vendor just to speak with them about their quote to ensure that they were going to meet the expectations under the bidding process. Outlined within the report, of course, is the different areas of which the methodology of what we had asked for in the RFP. And during that process of going back to the vendor, we also asked if they could take the last requirement and make it as an optional requirement in the hopes to, again, save a little bit of money as we're going forward, because the quotes that came back were a little bit more than we originally anticipated. So that is, of course, something up for discussion now, because that last requirement was something that wasn't part of the original council ask, but it was something that we added to the tender as part of our operational audit research to ensure that with the development that we have going on, that we are set up to future-proof, basically, for what we have going on in the size and scale. So based on that, we have, with the staff resource requirement, it came in at 80,950, and this is before taxes. And the recommendation is within the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Director Rochon. Questions, committee? If I don't notice your hand up, Megan, there, just holler out or just chime in, eh? Nothing from committee. Sorry, Councillor Yanish.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. How can we get an idea of how the proponents responded to the request for additional work?
Yeah, so of course it was a great collaboration discussion. We explained kind of what we were looking for and expanded on the inclusion of the public works part of the reading process and the additional interviews that we would need, as well as express some areas where we would require testing or would require some level of assurance, or at least some level of acknowledgement of accuracy or, consistency. So we talked about those as well. The biggest thing that we changed the scope was around the staff because we talked about future proofing. So they wanted to kind of get an idea of what developments were on the way, what our capacity was, and things like that. So we expressed that we have lots of documentation that would help them assist with that calculation. So,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Sounds positive. Yep, thank you.
Citizen Halverson.
I was just curious about the timeline and what they were thinking in terms of how long it was going to take, and has have you considered whether you have capacity to take this on? This does feel like a very large project.
So thank you, citizen member. We had a discussion about the timeline because as we were concerned with their timeline originally, just because of what we had on the go at the current state, but we did express that we would like to have it done early spring. And they said as long as we're not pushing them, they can get it done by our deadline. So we are aiming for early spring.
And what is there any indication like how many weeks? It's look at this cost, I would think it's probably a couple months work.
So they had originally estimated in the RFP that they would have started last week and then finished by, I believe, the second week of April. So because we had to go back to them and because we brought in the scope, they kind of came back with an updated timeline. But we did say that in our original amendments or submission questions, when we were asked the 3 questions, that we would hopefully be done by the end of spring. So they kind of reworked their timeline around our timeline. So I don't know if that answers your question. It will probably be a couple of months.
Yeah. I know it does. I just I could see it just being a substantial project for
Yes.
you to take
Yes,
on, and a lot of documentation required.
And yes, we've expressed that. And a lot of the documentation and interview process, of course, while we're going through year end and prepping for audit. And of course, while we're also preparing budgets. So we've kind of expressed that that's kind of our priority right now is budget and then moving into year end reporting for the province as well as the auditors. So with them, it's kind of, we're going to be working with them along the way. But our goal is to try and have that audit off our plates before the next audit begins.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Wheaton, no, nothing. So just to be clear, Director, it's because it says operational audit, so it is operational. And and there's that financial component that council has been looking for and has asking questions about, and I just want to make sure we're going to have all the answers that council has been looking for before we send the recommendation off.
Yeah, so with our RFP request, we had highlighted within the RFP internal processes and controls, which include meter reading process, customer billing process, water customer account adjustments, as well as general ledger account adjustments. So it's going to look at those entries. One of the things that when you, of course, have an irregular audit, they set a threshold and they don't review every transaction that happens. They don't go into each individual item to assess it for. So one of the things that we focused on was ensuring that the council was going to get the answers to the questions that they wanted. So that, again, around the credit, around the general ledger adjustments, which would be our accruals and our voids, around the meter reading process to ensure that that was accurate. And of course, compliance with the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board handbook and rules and regulations. So all of that is part of that audit. So that should hopefully provide the answers that council is seeking relating to the financial system and how that worked that year. And of course, happy to answer any other questions relating to that. And I think you spoke to the financial component, which I'll highlight too. With this RFP coming in, it's not a budgeted item. It is also a utility item. So this will be funded through the utility. It will be part of the operating expense line under auditing. So that will be something that you'll have to see. That will be something that wasn't part of the rate study as well. So again, that's going to be something that'll be a little higher on the utility budget upcoming.
Further questions, committee? Not seeing anything. We do have a recommendation in there. If somebody wishes to make that, then Councillor Yanish.
I can make that, Chair.
First page.
Yep, you got it.
The audit committee recommends that council approves the award of request for proposal WHRM S24-01 2022-23 water operational audit to MNP for $80,950 plus applicable taxes.
Moved by Councillor Yanish. Is there a seconder? Seconded
Second
by
motion.
Councillor Whedon, and the question on is question of council approves the award of request for proposals WHRM FS 24-01 2022-2023 water operational audit to MNP for $80,950 plus applicable taxes. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing nothing. All those in favor signify by hands up or thumb at home. Perfect. Motion is passed. Thank you very much, everybody. You have a quick director's update, Director? You want to share?
Yes, thank you. I know this isn't on our agenda, but I wanted to bring it forward as an item for you to be aware of because it is coming down. It is something that I'll be updating council on as part of our budget workshops and as we're going into budget deliberations. But we have been notified by our financial system provider that they are life cycling out our financial system. So what that means is we are going to have to shop for a new financial system. And so we have, of course, some lead time. They can't just pull it away. But the last payroll update will be in 2029. And the last security update will be in 2031. And that at that time, after that, the databases and product will no longer be available. So we have to ensure that we're out of our financial product before the 2029 deadline so that we can continue to process payroll. So it's something that the financial management team as well as our IT staff have been working on and looking at other products available. This is not just impacting West Hants Regional Municipality. This is impacting all customers, all municipalities that are part of that product. So, and some municipalities are moving forward quite quickly on a new system and some are kind of giving it a little bit more time, but there is going to be a delicate balance. We don't want to be last in line because then we're going to be at the bottom of the list for implementation, but we also don't want to be first in line. So we're going to try and work on a timeline and we'll be presenting that to council in the upcoming budget. But it is going to be like, if we think about how long consolidation took, and that was moving to the same system, this is going to be moving to a different system. So we would anticipate about the same amount of time implementation and training wise, because this will also be a lot of training for our staff. So I just wanted to give you guys an update that that is coming. We're working on it and we'll have more information for you in the coming months.
Budget time. Perfect. Anything on that quickly, committee? All right. Move on to presentations. Manager Gibson, Policy and Internal Controls.
Perfect. Thank you very much. This is going to be a refresher for most of you. I was here just a few months ago and went over these same presentations, but for those new to the committee, we do a bit of financial training every year in the audit committee. So today we will be going over our policies as well as processes and procedures. First, we are going to look at the policies that affect the financial services department and our decision making. Of course, as I go through this, guys, stop me, ask any questions if you need to. So these are the policies that affect our financial statements, and we have broken them out into 3 different categories. The first one is policies that impact our decision-making and procedures. There's 5 policies here: the expense policy, hospitality policy, investment policy, procurement policy, and our reserve policy. Just a bit more detail on each of those. Our expense policy is in place to direct staff and counselors on reimbursement, should that be necessary. It also assigns the approved per diem amounts from council, and you'll note these ones haven't been updated. I just realized we just recently updated those, so they are a little bit higher now. Our breakfast, I believe, is at 20 now. Lunch is 22.50, and dinner is 35 with incidentals at 10. I'm fairly certain. So this is for, like I said, counselors and staff members if they need to travel as well as in here. And then the second policy we'll look at is the hospitality policy, which gives direction for us on if we need to have an event for the public. This would be something outside of what is required for regular business. So, you know, council meetings, we may have snacks and things here, but we can't proceed as a municipality without the council meeting. So those don't really qualify. But some of the events that like our recreation team puts on, the Easter egg hunts, things like that, are considered hospitality. And so with both of these policies, the expense and hospitality one, we are required from the province to report these on a quarterly basis on our website. And then each year it's reviewed by our auditor, and then it is recorded to the province as well at that time. And it is something that the province looks for. They check on our website each quarter to make sure that it has been put there. The next policy is the investment policy, which is pretty straightforward. It just kind of tells us how we can invest our funds and who's in charge of that, which is primarily the CAO with direction from the Director of Finance. And then the procurement policy, which was just updated last March. This directs staff on how we can purchase for the municipality. This also includes any community groups who may receive grants from us. We do ask that they have a policy in place of their own or they follow us. It also gives authority to the CAO to approve purchases within the approved budget, goods and services up to $25,000 and construction up to $100,000. We give directors approval for purchases up to $16,000, and then directors are able to give signing authority delegation within their departments, managers to $5,500, and other staff members to $2,500. And then anything that is outside of our budget that happens to come up does come back to council for approval in those instances. Oh, yes. And this policy does also govern the application and use of our credit cards. So in here, we have some procedures on how credit cards are used, what type of reporting we need. It's something I review every month. Each director has a card that they review every month, and then it comes to me. And so that's how we keep track of that. And the policy dictates all of that. And then finally, the reserve policy. And this policy is to help us establish long-term funding strategies for the municipality for the purchase of typically capital goods as well as cash management. Currently, our policy has a threshold of 10% of annual operating revenue in our operating reserve, 2% of the total building assets in our building reserve, 8% of total road value in a road infrastructure reserve, 4% of total vehicle value in our vehicle reserve, as well as 4% of total equipment value in our equipment reserve. And when it comes to fire, it's 2% of the total fire value. This is, of course, limited by our budget and what type of surplus over expenses we might have as we're budgeting. We can't budget ourselves into a deficit, so we can only put in as much as is available there each year. So the next group of policies are those affecting our revenue.
So just before we jump into the impacting revenue side, the reserve policy is something on our agenda to be updated in the next few months, because council put forward a motion to look at creating new reserves based on the transfer tax, host community fees, and I can't remember the third funding source at this time, but there's 3 different funding sources that we have that we're looking to add into this as a reserve. So we're going to update it as part of the budgeting process.
Perfect. So yes, the next group of policies are those impacting revenue, and they are grouped into 5 different sections themselves. The first are those that affect our general services and water. So we have an accounts receivable policy, which governs the municipality being able to charge interest on outstanding invoices. We have an acceptance of donation policy. So this outlines how the municipality accepts any donations that we receive, as well as our official donation receipts that go out to those donors. We have our fees policy, which sets out the fees for our bylaws and policies, resolutions authorized by council, licenses and services. And then finally, we have our new utility assistance rebate policy, which has made rebates available to our residents for quarterly sewer and bulk water fees. And then next, we have the policies affecting tax revenue. There are 3 of these: our residential property tax assistance policy, which creates rebates for residents for their annual tax billing. We have our tax collection policy, and this governs how we actually collect our taxes, including interest and arrears and anything to do with the tax sale. And then finally, we have a tax exemption policy, and this is for registered Canadian charities, nonprofits, or nonprofits with commercial space that are able to qualify for an exemption in the taxes. And then the next is the area rate policy. And so this establishes guidelines for when we can establish or manage an area rate that's approved by council. So this would be typically outside groups who are looking to increase revenue for their group or their community club, whatever they might have. And it has some rules where you have to go to the community and get approval that way, as well as approval from council to be able to add an area rate to tax collection that goes directly to those groups. And then finally, we have just another category, which is about disposal of surplus real property. And this outlines exactly how we're allowed to dispose of these things, including the goods and services on the next page, which we do offer first to schools of Nova Scotia, the Annapolis Valley Regional School Board, and the Atlantic Canada Electronics Stewardship. In this policy, it dictates that the CAO will identify which materials and goods are surplus and to be sold at a surplus sale. So next we have policies impacting expenses, and this is acquisition of real property policy, council remuneration policy, grants and contributions policy, property assessed clean energy, our regional high school bursary policy, and our newest approved policy, the home flood protection pilot program. Acquisition of real goods governs how we acquire property, including property outside of the municipality, if that is applicable. There would be a needs assessment and documenting the rationale and justification for this to be approved by council. The second policy is the remuneration policy, which sets out the rates of councillors each year, as well as requirements to receive this and the required deductions for missing meetings over and above the allotted time period. And this also sets the rate for remuneration for citizen committee members as well. You're probably all familiar with that. It's been recently updated. Third, we have our grants and contributions policy, and this is to help council determine the amount of funding that can be given out during each budget deliberation. So these include our larger facility grants or operating grants for some of our smaller groups. And it also establishes when applications will be received and reviewed and what qualifies someone to get one of these grants. And then our property assessed clean energy is for those, it provides guidance for the municipality who may wish to participate in Switch West Hands, which is increasing efficiency of their home and receiving a loan funded through West Hands and PACE. The policy sets the parameters for this, which makes them qualify, and it also speaks to the actions of the municipality may take if a resident is unable to pay their loan payments. The last time we went over this, we did have a question about what would happen to somebody's mortgage if they missed a payment here. And I spoke with John, our coordinator here, and he indicated that because it's on our tax account, it has nothing to do with their mortgage, of course, that there is no consequence should they pay other than when you sell your house. If you sell your house and that amount is still owing to us, it will have to be cleared up at that time. Same as any regular taxes. And then we have our regional high school bursary program. And this was created to ensure that the municipality has resources allocated equally throughout West Hants to support and encourage all graduating students. There are 4 bursaries that we provide, each for $1,000. And then finally, our newest program is the Home Flood Protection Pilot Program. And this policy has been put in place to offer financial assistance to property owners and renters relating to flood risk mitigation and upgrades. It was set to a maximum of $400,000 for the year. However, recently council approved updating this value to $480,000 to allow all those who applied to be assisted. There is a risk assessment that's needed to be qualify, but that cost is covered by the municipality. I know that was very quick, but any questions on any of the policy?
Questions, committee? No? All right, we'll continue on. Manager Gibson.
All right, so next we're going to look at some of our financial processes. This one is a bit shorter. So first, we do have an updated financial services organizational chart. I'm going a little too fast here for the screen. Just one second.
You've had a lot of practice, Manager Gibson.
It's true. It's true. All right, perfect. So since the last update on this, we have made one change, which is a reduction to the IT team, resulting in an IT consultant being our full IT support now. Previously, there was an IT specialist. The rest of the team is made up of kind of 2 halves of the financial services department, one which concentrates on revenue and incoming funds, and the other concentrates on our outgoing funds, such as accounts payable and payroll. So in the revenue side, we do have our tax and utility, as well as our customer service clerks and our revenue services supervisor and assistants who work very closely with the customer service clerks, as well as the water utility and tax clerks, to ensure we're getting all of our bills out there and returned. So then on the next page, this is our process for when a payment is made. So our accounting process. So first the customer would come in and make a payment. At that point, our customer service clerks receive the payment. They enter it into a batch in our accounting system. And then at the end of the day, it's reconciled. And the next morning, it's given to our revenue services supervisor or assistant if necessary. And they close the batch, they count the cash drawers to confirm the amounts, they post and prepare deposits and return the deposits to the bank. Our manager of revenue and cash management does a reconciliation at the end of each month and then posts those entries after the director has had time to review them. In addition to this, we do have several offsite payment locations, such as the pool and the sports complex and the community center. These payments are made at the locations and then verified by the facility manager who delivers them to the office here at Morrison Drive, where we then do follow the same process as before. The next thing we're going to talk about is banking. Our current banking provider is the Royal Bank. As I said before, the manager of revenue and cash management does monthly reconciliations. Currently, we have 31 bank accounts. However, based on the recent URAB ruling on consolidating the 2 water utilities, we are in the process of consolidating some of those bank accounts as well to get that number down a little bit. We have 4 people with signing authority on these accounts, and we do require at least 2 of them at a time to do that. We have our CAO, Director of Finance, our Manager of Revenue and Cash Management, and myself, Manager of Accounting and Financial Reporting. And then when it comes to policy development for financial policies, of course, They are often drafted by our staff, reviewed by the manager and director, and then the municipal clerk, as well as the CAO, before they come to committee of the whole for review and then adoption at council. Depending on the policy, there may be a requirement for an additional legal review as well, but not always. And then
And I'll add too, and depending on the policy too, it may come back to audit committee depending on what it requires based on the mandate of the audit committee.
that's right. And so next we'll talk about our auditing requirement. Our current auditors are Kent & Duffett Professional Accountants. We are in a contract with them through to the end of our 2025-26 audit year. They review and develop an auditing plan and present to the audit committee. And at this time of year, we are starting to think about that audit planning situation. And probably at our next audit committee meeting, you'll have the auditor here discussing what the plan is for this year. We have an audit engagement letter that will be brought then, which is signed off by our mayor. And then the on-site audit work normally begins around June and July with audit results presented to the committee in September. And next, we're going to talk a bit more about procurement. So the first thing that our procurement policy provides is a signing authority, which dictates who has approval to purchase and sign invoices for the municipality. These can be granted by the CAO under direction or suggestion from the directors of each department. The signing authority list is maintained by myself and updated frequently throughout the year as new staff join or signing requirements change. With this list, our accounts payable coordinator has that, and she reviews it when she's entering her accounts payable information to make sure that the person who has approved it matches who's allowed to sign off on that dollar value as well as that general ledger account number. And as I mentioned, the procurement policy was updated in March 2024, and it sets the following guidelines. We have different values for purchase. The first is under $1,000, where we have all documentation is signed based on that signing authority. And then over $1,000, we require an electronic purchase order to be submitted and approved for the purchase prior to the purchase happening. If it's between $1,000 and $10,000, we do ask for 3 verbal quotes before it is then approved through PO by the appropriate manager or director. Between $10,000 and $25,000, we require 3 formal written quotes, which then, depending on the value, would have approval through purchase order from the director or the CAO. And then finally, for anything over $25,000, we would go through public procurement, which then would require approval from the CAO or council, depending on the value of that amount. There are some alternative procurement practices that are set forth by the Canada Free Trade Agreement, which allows deviating from this policy in certain specific instances. For instance, if there was a company that had a monopoly on what we were looking for, or if we had an emergency and needed something right now, that gives the CAO direction or authority to make those approvals and then bring information reports to council about them.
The other aspect of alternative procurement is we are still required to report to the Nova Scotia procurement on those as well.
Yes, if they're over a certain value. And so then next is the purchase order approval. As I said, this is an electronic system, which has a background workflow that is set up, and the system automatically sends emails to the person who needs to do the approval. If it's a multiple step approval, it will know that it has to go to Carly, and then once she approves, it has to go to Mark before it's fully approved. This is updated based on the signing authority changes that the CAO would approve each time those changes are made. And then from that, we'll look at the process of invoice payment. So again, a PO is required if it's over $1,000. Typically, the purchaser or the admin assistant for that department would create the PO, and then it would move on to the manager or director or CAO for approval. Once the invoice comes in, this gets coded and signed by the appropriate person, and then it moves to our accounts payable coordinator who does the entries and prepares batches for myself to review and post, at which point she prints our checks and our electronic fund transfers, which are approved primarily by the Director of Financial Services and Manager of Revenue and Cash Management. Though we do have some alternatives, myself and Mark can sign, as well as our payroll specialist, should we need her to. Then once they're signed, it goes back to our accounts payable coordinator to get the checks in the mail, and I actually take care of sending the electronic fund transfer to the bank. At the same time, we check our check. We do a daily check of cash checks in the bank account, just to ensure that everything looks in order on those cash checks, to ensure that they haven't been duplicated or edited in any way. And that's the end of the processes and procedures.
Went through it pretty quick.
It's true.
Are there any questions at all, committee, on any of those slides? I know they were circulated in the package, so you've all had ample time to look through them. Councillor Yanish.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a really general question about pretty well everything we've discussed tonight, except maybe the first item. But where or how might artificial intelligence affect all these policies and procedures and how we manage them? Any suggestions?
Yes. So it's definitely something that's been on everybody's mind. Before we even consider implementing any sort of artificial intelligence, of course, as a municipality, we would look at the risks and analyze what that is. And then we would probably create a policy that would govern our use of artificial intelligence. So I have taken a few courses in the interim, just like looking at some of the risk analysis that we might have. One of the biggest things is whatever you share with artificial intelligence becomes their property, basically. So that's the biggest thing. So we got to be very mindful of what data we're sharing. However, there's other ones that are more closed loop, which we'll be looking at. I know some of our counterparts are in the development phase of policies. So this one is one that we may not be the first to implement a policy, but we definitely will be looking to our counterparts as well as we're going through this. As more and more artificial intelligence are popping up. But policy development definitely seems to be a big area where people are voicing the benefits, because you can literally upload policies, numerous policies, to compare and analyze, and then make a new policy on. But again, you got to assess the risk of what you're doing and make sure that you're not sharing data. Like we wouldn't want to use artificial intelligence to do minutes, or because those are municipal property, you know what and recording, those are also another form of AI. But there's AIs out there for everything based on our research and some of the stuff that I have. There's actually a website that said it's basically there's an AI for that, and you can just type in what you're looking for and it will generate all the AIs that will serve that purpose. So it's definitely something that's coming, but it's not going to come to us before a policy is established.
If I may, I think to the other side of that, how artificial intelligence may be a risk to us versus an asset, is that we make sure, for instance, we do electronic transfers. We do have some pretty tight security with the bank there, but we also don't set anybody up for an electronic transfer without contacting them by telephone first at a number that they have not given to us, to ensure that the information that we have received is accurate. We really have IT creating, or not creating, but offering courses and such to ensure that all of our staff are aware of what's out there and what to look out for, so that they're not accidentally clicking on anything. But overall, I think it could affect any of these if it were to slip in somehow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The other thing is you'll see a lot of businesses, private businesses using automatic AP processes through AI that recognize and input the invoice for you. So, I mean, that's another type of AI that's being used that's right connected to your financial system. So, again, we have to assess risk before we roll this out. And one of the ways that municipalities usually help control risk is set policy that governs the usage of items. So, we'll probably be looking at that in the next few years on how that's going to benefit us, especially with the other item we talked about relating to our financial system change and what that might look like as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's all very, very helpful. And I think, in a broader context, I would think that maybe it would be wise to start having a conversation at the council level about artificial intelligence and how we are going to deal and manage with it as a municipality. It just as a starting point, I think that'd be useful. But thank you very much for your comments. That is very helpful.
Anything else? Committee. All right, seeing nothing, we are at our point. We have nothing correspondence based, so public participation. If anybody wishes to come up and address committee on any matter, we can take that now. We're good. All right. Next meeting day is May tentatively 2025, at which point we'll circulate the agenda at that point. So I'll look for a motion to adjourn committee. Moved by Councillor Whedon, seconded by Councillor Yanish. Hands up or thumbs in favor? Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Anybody at home watching? We appreciate it.
Thank you.